Hi, everybody. My name is Lindabeth Binkley, and I am the oboist on the wonderful new recording called From Earth and Sky that features the music of Jenni Brandon. And today I thought it would be kind of fun to have Jenni join me and have a discussion about the very first piece that's on the CD called Wood Song. It's the piece for solo oboe. It's super cool, and I love it. And so we're going to just kind of have a chat about the piece and how it evolved and just kind of give you a little bit more information, mainly because at this time during the pandemic, a lot of oboists are looking for solo oboe music, and this is an excellent option, and it's brand new. So you want to get it, like seriously, get it now. Right, Jenni?
Yes.
Okay, so the first question I have for you, Jenni, is when I approached you about writing this piece, what how did you pick Woodsong as like the theme, and what sort of inspired you to do that?
Well, I wanted to work. I think I always loved working with poetry, so I wanted to work with something that was poetry. And I feel like you and I talked about like nature themes and ideas like that. And so I wanted to find a poem that spoke to both nature, but then also to a story of some sort. And the Sarah Teasdale poem, I've always loved her poetry. And when I came across this, I thought, oh, this is great because it speaks about the soul and the heart, and also about this bird, the wood thrush. And so it really kind of met the criteria of sort of what we were looking for a piece. But I love the imagery in it, and I tend to look for imagery when I'm writing pieces, even if it's with poetry or not with poetry. I really like the imagery as a basis for writing the piece. And so I thought that this poem in particular had great imagery to tell a story through the line of the solo oboe, for sure.
And okay, so that's kind of my next question
Mm-hmm.
is I'm really curious to know, like when you were writing it, were you hearing like the tone and the timbre of the oboe, or were you thinking more like of the bird? I mean, we had talked about it, and you sent me the wood call or the wood thrush calls and everything, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I'm just kind of curious about that because when I played it, or when I play it and worked on it, and when we were doing it together, there were moments there that I thought, oh, she really understands the tension in the line that an oboe can do, that other instruments really can't. And so I was just curious about that.
Hmm. Obviously, I definitely was thinking about the oboe, and in particular thinking about you and your playing, because I've gotten so familiar with you as a performer and how you play. And so I knew I had a really wonderful place to work from, because you're such a wonderful performer, and that I could give you all sorts of wonderful things to try. So there was a lot of aspects in it as I wrote it. I was writing it for you as a performer, but I was writing it for the oboe, and then wanting to incorporate this idea of um, the sounds that this wood thrush makes. Yeah, and it was the Audubon Society website that I'd sent you links from, that people had gone and recorded the sounds of the songs of the wood thrush. And so I just thought it was really amazing to get to hear this bird sing, and then to get to play with imitating that in the oboe, because the oboe to me is it's a vocal instrument. I think that's why I love writing for the oboe so much, because it's such a soprano, it's such a voice. And so getting to tell the story through this oboe, it was kind of the best of both worlds, of getting to tell a bird song story and to tell a story of what the oboe could do. And so that was definitely like all of the things that I was thinking about as I was writing this piece.
Cool. So what I want to do is I'm going to share with everybody like a little bit of the score, so you can see what it looks like, and talk about a couple of the things that Jenni has done specifically in it. In the event that you're going to be playing it, you can get it right from the source. What we were thinking and why. Because what was fascinating for me, I've never commissioned a piece. I've never worked closely with a composer. And I think the thing that was really cool for me and was fun for me was a lot of our discussions revolved around articulation. I don't know if you realize that or not, about how oboists in particular interpret different articulations as opposed to a singer. And so, I think that comes into play a lot in this piece.
And it was so helpful too with all of the tips and ideas that you gave me with this, because sometimes I do tend to flip back into thinking like a singer, especially when I'm writing for the oboe, I think, because I'm like, oh, you're just a singer, you can do singer things. And I'm like, yes, but you're an oboe and you can do a whole bunch of really interesting articulations and sounds and timbral things. And so it was helpful. Our conversations were great. I learned a lot while I was writing this piece.
Yeah, it was super fun. And so like the first thing opens with the oboe version of the wood thrush call, um, where I had to really work and sort of think ahead about how I wanted to speed up and slow down. You would think that that's easy to do, but in the in the context of trying to sound like a bird, and then you're an oboist who thinks very like cut and dry. This was kind of challenging for me, not gonna lie. But again, we really did a good job, I think, of indicating where that is. And then you are a big fan of timbral trills, aren't
I
you?
am. I don't know. I just there's such a cool sound, especially on the oboe. I mean, it's this sort of ethereal, otherworldly sound that the timbral trill does, and it's just I think for a bird especially seems completely natural to have timbral trills.
Well, and I did think about that. Like, and it's all I'm doing as an oboist on a timbral trill is you finger the main note, like in this case, the first one's an A, and then you like wiggle your D or your low C key or something that's going to just ever so slightly shade the main note. And I, believe it or not, Jenny, I don't know if I ever told you this. I thought long and hard about, do I want to start slow? Do I want
Oh,
to start fast? And so when I would go back to those Audubon recordings and just kind of listen and think, okay, what would that be?
I love it.
So some of them I did slow, some I did fast. Um, and that was, I think, really interesting. And then the other thing I wanted to talk about just a little bit is that you really did a good job of telling me and telling the players when to do this sort of hesitantly thing, this ba 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 ba
Mm-hmm.
ba 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 ba, and when to do it straight, ba 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 beep ba ba.
Yeah.
Um, and that sort of playing with that in these opening bird moments, I think is really really cool. And my favorite though, my favorite part of this piece, okay, y'all are going, ooh, let me slow down, is right here. Sorry, you're gonna have to get your own part. Um, true. But my favorite part of this piece is at E.
Mm,
Um, my heart that walked with bitterness came back from very
mm,
far. I love what you did with this.
good.
It's this great sort of stretching out. It's a real change in color and mood. And I just want to talk real briefly because I know oboists out there, you're going to be like, really? Did Jenny really, did she really do this to you? It's not Jenny's fault. Jenny's fault. This little high G here, right at F.
That's all your fault. She wanted me to do that. She suggested it. I was like, okay, I'll do it.
I apologize to all the oboists out in the world, but here's the thing. I actually love the third octave. Not a lot of oboists do, but I think you can get a really beautiful color and a beautiful timbre out there. And one of the drafts that you sent, this passage,
Mm,
I think you went back down to like either B or something or G
mm-hmm,
at after this retard, and all or after, no, you went to an E. That's what it was. You went back to
mm-hmm.
that F. And when I was playing it and I landed on that F and I'm crescendoing and I'm thinking, it just feels wrong to go to an E. It has to go to E. So I'm sorry, people, but go for the G because it's just a glorious moment in the piece.
Well, and when you played it for me too, I mean, the way that it's set up too, the way that you played it and showed it to me, I was like, oh, of course, like that's the line has to go there. So I think naturally it was your instinct was so right on that. And so like, yeah, we worked back and forth together on this and you would suggest things. And I'm like, sure. I'm like, if you can do it, like, let's do it. And that's really where the line was meant to go. And so you heard it and helped me find that. So yeah, it's you play it beautifully. So it's
Well, thank
great.
you. That's very inspiring. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think that, and again, here are some other moments where you really understood that how we approach the third octave and how we get to the
Mm.
third octave is really important. And I think a lot of composers want the color and want the timbre, but they don't think about the fact or don't know that there has to be some preparation in order for it to really sound like it's part of the line.
Mm.
Like you're not just throwing it in there because you want us to play high and have that kind of timbre. So I just think you did such a great job with that.
Oh, thanks.
Um,
I
yeah.
think a lot, and I think a lot about that too when I'm writing for the instruments. And I've learned a lot, especially writing for so much for double reeds for both oboe and bassoon, to really think about how to set up the upper octaves. Like, I mean, the instrument's capable of doing it, but it's all about how you get there. And so there's just so much beauty and possibility in those upper octaves. I think so, and yeah, I really spent a lot of time thinking about that, to be careful, and then relying on, like, our conversations were so amazing and gave me so much insight and so much more clarity on the instrument itself, that, like, I'll carry that from this project into future projects. So it's so valuable to me to have, like, these deep conversations that we had while the piece was being written, for sure.
Well, so I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. I don't think is there anything else you want to show off in this? Is there anything
Um,
you think of?
No, yeah, there's just contrasting sections. We've got some normal trills in there versus the timbral trills. So you get some regular trills, and yeah, just I had a lot of fun playing with the texture and being able to give you a chance to, show off what you do so well, which is both beautiful lyrical, but then also the agility that the oboe can have when it's played so well. So that's a lot of what I was um, trying to discover and create while I was writing this piece for you.
And I chuckled because I remember when we had the first conversation about this, it was like, well, how long, you said, well, how long do you want this piece to be? And I said, I don't know, 4 minutes, 5 minutes. And so my question for you is,
Mm.
do you kind of let the compositional process, do you just kind of let it unfold? And if it ends up taking more time, that's okay? Or were you initially thinking, I need to keep this concise and brief, because we ended up with I think with a longer piece than either one of us really intended,
I
maybe
think so. How long is the final piece? I can't remember right now.
like
I'm
7
forgetting.
minutes.
So, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
When the performer gives me some space to do that, I will write until the piece feels like it's completed. But I also know not to go too long. Like a solo piece, I think that's a good length for a piece. You
Mhm.
start getting, I've written some longer stuff too, but like, I think for this one and the story that we were telling, this was the right length. And so sometimes it's very specific. Like sometimes there's a project where it's like, it has to be 10 minutes because that's the only amount of room we have, or something. If it's like a chamber piece, it's like, it has to be 10 minutes because it's the room we have on our CD and we're going to record it. But if the performer is okay with it and we can spin it out a little bit, sometimes it just takes a natural path on its own. Um, it's not to say I can't write within a time frame, but it's nice to have freedom to complete sort of through the idea. So it was fun. It was fun that you let me do that.
Awesome. Well, I'm lucky. I feel incredibly blessed to have this piece, and I'm really excited for other people to discover it and hopefully discover more of your music. That being the main sort of reasoning for doing the CD and putting all
Mhm.
your on one. Um, it's important to me, obviously to get your music out there and to show the variety and the style,
Mhm.
your particular style, because I enjoy it so much. For me, it's very like visual. Like I get
Mhm.
lots of imagery from what you do and how you write things. Um, Sometimes it's not always clear for me. Like it takes me a couple tries through.
Sometimes I'm just hazy, so it's okay. Well,
um,
that's actually what I wonder with you too. That was something I was thinking about, was like how you choose music. And not just necessarily for this CD, because it's such a thrill, obviously, to have you have done an entire CD of my music, which is super cool. But like in general, I always think about how performers choose music. And I'm curious, like, it seems like you definitely, you love a particular style of music, do you feel? Or are you just open to anything that kind of strikes your fancy. I mean, I wonder about that too, especially, you know, like when you choose repertoire that you're going to practice and spend a good amount of time with too.
Right. So I'm sitting here wondering, do I give you like the real answer or do I give you the
So give me the real answer. Give me what is Lindabeth like?
it's, you know, and I feel slightly embarrassed to admit this, but it's true. It's who I am. So I should just be proud of it. I am melodically driven. I am a melodic.
Yay.
So I love great melodies and color and timbre. That's not to say that I don't enjoy, you know, the other avant-garde kind of stuff, or that I won't play that stuff. I will do that. But even when I'm playing that stuff, I'm constantly like trying to figure out a way to make it musical. Like, there's got to be a melody in here somewhere. You know,
I love it.
that's where I am. So, and I enjoy, in some ways, I really enjoy the challenge, especially with new composers' music. Like, they might not know that there's a melody in there, and I'll try to find it, or I'll try to shape it, or I'll try to, and that's why a lot of our conversations were like, I would ask you, is this what you're thinking of for this phrase? Is this the shape or the inflection that you want? When we had, you know, a lot of those meetings.
Oh yeah.
Um,
It's valuable. It's so valuable when you ask those questions of composers, because it makes us think like, oh yeah, what did I mean there? You know, if we weren't clear, or sometimes you as a performer bring something out in the music that we might not have expected. And that's always a wonderful surprise.
right. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's a good question. So I feel a little guilty admitting that, but it's true. My
Oh no.
students know that too. So they're constantly trying to get me to do crazy stuff. And
You know, I think we like what we like. And I mean, it's not, I mean, you challenge yourself with the repertoire that you choose, and you challenge, you know, you challenge your students, I know you do, to try different stuff. But I feel like too, as a performer, if you're going to spend a chunk of time learning something, hopefully you enjoy it. You know, you pick out, you know, you get to play something that you love. I think it's great. Melodic driven. That's my whole story. So that's all good.
we're a good combination.
We're a good combination. I always wonder too, like, I mean, you know, you and I, you know, worked through this whole process of the CD, and especially with this piece being written. But I always wonder, like, and this is sort of maybe this is like a good question that your students would be like, oh, I'll learn something here too. Like, how this sounds like a very teacher question. Like, how do you balance your time? You know, between like, okay, so you just spent like this chunk of time recording a CD, right? So that's a lot of time on a project. But then in the middle of that, you're still teaching, you're still making reads, you're still practicing, you're still going to rehearsals, you're still performing. Like, do you have like a secret to balancing it all? Because you do a lot. I mean, you're doing a lot, and you're doing a lot successfully. And like, I just wonder, you know, like what's your secret, or like, what do you do to keep you moving forward, even when some days you're like, I don't feel like doing any of this?
Oh, that's a very good question, especially
Yeah.
right now.
Right.
And if you're watching this later, this is being recorded in the midst of the pandemic, which is why we are doing it this way, because we can't be in the same space together. I think that's a really good question. Me personally, honestly, I don't feel like I balance things very well. I wish I did a better job of that. Um, I think the one thing I am good at, however, is big picture view. So I will keep in mind when a big performance is coming up, and I will know that, okay, you've got to dig out some time, you've got to carve out some time to really focus on getting ready for that. Um, it's challenging because I love teaching and I love my students, and I'm very passionate about what I do with them. So sometimes I will shortchange myself, my own playing at that expense, if I were to be perfectly honest. But the nice part about doing this project was most of the recording took place while I was on sabbatical. So that was definitely a great thing, and I've loved it. Like, learning wood song completely, I learned that completely during the sabbatical, and that was awesome. So I'm constantly trying to figure that out. The one thing I will say that I do a good job at, and no one will be surprised by this, who knows me, is I'm pretty good at staying on top of my read making.
That's what I was wondering about actually, specifically like reed making, because there's no like, there's no forgiveness. Like you either have a reed or you don't have a reed.
No.
Yeah.
And when you're recording a solo oboe piece, you either have a read or you don't.
Yeah.
Everybody's gonna know. So I had a good read day on this on the day we recorded one
You
song.
you did. It's so beautiful. And I mean that's what I just think about with the reed players with you all, like the time you have to think about planning to make reeds and not just like, oh, I need a reed for tomorrow. Like you got to go back like a couple weeks to make that happen
Yeah,
and to really make it work.
yeah. I mean, I have a
Yeah.
thing where what I try to do, and I'm mostly successful at it, is I promise myself that I have to be in contact with the process for 5 minutes every day. And that could be anything from scraping on it for 5 minutes, or maybe I'll tie one up. Um, and inevitably, I'll go longer than the 5 minutes. But just knowing that I only have to do it for 5 minutes will
Makes you feel better.
make me feel better. It'll get me to my desk. And there have been times where I've come home from a really long day at school and prepped lecture, and it's like 10 o'clock at night, and I haven't touched my reed knife or my, and I will go in and I'll be like, okay, 5 minutes, I gotta do this. But if I don't do that, then I lose the feel and I
Mm.
connection to it. And for me, I need to maintain that because I rely so much on that little thing to do the job.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a perfect, like, it's a perfect answer to say, like, how do you balance your time? And for you, you commit you say, I've got a 5 minute window every day that I must make reads. And some days are longer. Most days are, I'm sure. Some days are like 6 minutes,
Yeah.
when you've had a really long day. But I think that's so valuable. I love that because you've got a plan. Like you've got something that you commit to every single day. That's awesome. That's a great thing.
So then how does that work for you? Do you have something similar that like, do you work in spurts? Do you work every day? How does that work?
um I It shifts a lot. I mean, I'm always looking for new and better ways to work, but I tend to I work every day. And so whether it's always writing, it depends on the project I'm working on. That's a big part of it. But every day at least I'm doing some sort of business work for the publishing for Jenni Brandon Music. I'm usually either, I'm editing the score or yes, I am touching on something every single day. And I keep a schedule for myself that says, I'm going to write at this time. I tend to sometimes set a schedule for myself at the beginning of the week and kind of go through my whole week and sort of set my schedule up that way. And I have, more flexibility to do that because I don't teach in university, but I do have set things in my schedule that I do. But yeah, I try to be pretty organized about it. It's been a little bit shifted during pandemic, let's just say. As we joked, we're on pandemic time. It's like island time, but
Yeah.
much scarier. So yeah, I mean, I try to keep a schedule. I
Okay.
try to have a schedule, and I try to stick within the parameters of that schedule to make sure that I get things done.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I guess the only thing I want to touch on just a little bit before we go, or just ask you before we go, is what is your advice to young players about if they're interested in getting involved with commissioning or commissioning a new work? Like, what would you suggest to them, or do you have any tidbits or helpful hints or encouragement that you could offer?
Sure. I mean, from just a collaborative standpoint, I would say go and make friends with composers right now. So, like your students, for example, within your school, they probably know somebody who writes some music. They should just make friends and make that connection. If they're interested in commissioning, I mean, there's a couple resources out there, and one of them, and it's available online. It's an older copy. It's called Meet the Composer. It's like commissioning guide, a guide to commissioning the organization used to be called Meet the Composer. And like, they'll have some like ideas of like how to reach out to composers and, like sort of cost. Cause the biggest thing I think that scares students is, oh my gosh, how am I going to pay for this? And that's again, a collaborative thing. Like you got to just talk to the composer and say, what can we do? What kind of arrangement can we make for this? And you just having a conversation, I guess maybe it boils down to reach out to a composer, have a conversation about commissioning them to write you a new work, and then sit down and figure out what that parameter is. And, you know, like you and I work together so well collaboratively. I think of all of these kind of projects as collaborative projects. And so it starts from a place of collaboration and it grows from there. So don't be afraid to start up a conversation with a composer. If there's a composer that you like for the students that are watching this, like if there's a composer that you like or you admire, reach out to that composer. I mean, even, you know, it could be, you know, if it's a famous composer, you're like, oh, I couldn't possibly do that. Trust me, we love to hear that people like our music. It's, you know, it feels good to know that people enjoy it. So, you know, don't be shy about that. And you'll be amazed at just crossing that barrier and saying, I like your music. I'd love to do something with you in the future. You cross that barrier of being separated and then suddenly opening to a dialogue. So be collaborative, talk to people, make friends with composers, and then the projects will grow from there. And then there's a deeper conversation to be had about like the details of, you know, like commissioning and things like that. But I truly believe it starts with making collaborations and friendships, and good things will come out of that.
Yeah, and just so you know, I mean, this project, let's see, it started with a conversation, Jenny, I want to record your music. And then, well, maybe you were like, I'll write you a piece. And then next thing I know, we're doing a chamber group together, the Limitless
Right.
Collecting. And then it just opened up to a lot of different really great collaborative moments. So
Yeah.
you just don't know what can happen when you make that first contact. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, and it's so fun. I mean, and these are going to be relationships that you'll make for a lifetime. Like you're going to make these relationships with people that are going to last a lifetime of friendships, of projects, of collaborations. And so it's just exciting. It's exciting. And I think that that's the beauty of being in school too, like for the students who are watching this. Your friends that you make now are going to be your contacts and connections for a lifetime. So, you know, work to make those friendships now, and you're going to be so happy because you're going to have so many great people to do great projects with.
Awesome. Okay, so I think that's all we're gonna chat about, I guess, today.
Great.
If you're curious and you want to listen to what song, you can find it on YouTube. There's a whole playlist of the album. You can find us on Spotify. If you'd like to purchase it, it's available iTunes, Amazon, Google Play, all those places. And you can also check out my website, lindabeth.com. There's a whole section devoted to the CD. The complete program notes are there, sound clips, all that good stuff. So thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed it. And I guess we'll sign off. Bye, Jenny.
Thank you. Bye.